Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Strategic Policy and Resources Committee on Wednesday, the 2nd of June 2021. My name is Murray Lyle and I am convener of the committee this morning. I'd just like to welcome everybody. And first of all, do we have any apologies for this morning's meeting or substitutes?
Morning. No, we don't have any apologies, but if we could just go through the sitting, if I read out your name, councillors, if you could confirm your presence. Obviously, we'll have Councillor Lyle. Do we have Councillor Duff?
Present.
Councillor Ahern?
Present.
Councillor Bailey?
Present.
Councillor Barrett? Peter Barrett?
Present.
Yes. Councillor Donaldson?
Present.
Councillor Drysdale?
Present.
Councillor Forbes?
Present.
Councillor Lane?
Yes, here.
Councillor McCall?
Present.
Councillor McEwen?
Present.
Provost Malloy?
Present.
Councillor Parrott?
Present.
Councillor Shires?
Present.
Councillor Stewart?
Present.
Councillor Wilson?
Present.
Thank you, that's everybody.
Okay, thank you. And moving on, do we have any declarations of interest in any of the items before us? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, convener. I have a non-financial interest in the Community Interest Fund paper as a trustee of two organisations who benefited from those fundings. The first is the Tayernern Trust, which was a council appointment. The second is the Institute Village Hall Trust, which is a private appointment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I take it we have no other declarations of interest. I don't see any hands raised or comments in the chat box, so we'll move on. Now, we'll move on to the minutes of previous meetings. There are a significant number of minutes of previous meetings, and as I am reading through these, I may not be able to pick up everything in the chat box, so if anyone wishes to comment on any of the minutes, if you could please just interrupt me and I will bring you in. So we'll begin with the minute of the meeting of the Strategic Policy and Resources Committee of the 25th of November. Then we have the minute of the Chief Executive Appointment Subcommittee of the 23rd of February. We have the minute of the meeting of the Chief Executive Appointment Subcommittee of the 12th of March. We have the minute of the meeting of the Chief Executive Appointment Subcommittee of the 23rd of March. We have the minute of the meeting of the Chief Executive Appointment Subcommittee of the 30th of March. We have the minute of the meeting of the Property Subcommittee of the 21st of October 19. We have the minute of the meeting of the Property Subcommittee of the 18th of February 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Property Subcommittee of August 24, 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Property Subcommittee of the 26th of October 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Employees Joint Consultative Committee 27th of February 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Employers Joint Consultative Committee 24th of September 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Employers Joint Consultative Committee 26th of November 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Corporate Health, Safety and Wellbeing Consultative Committee of the 19th of March 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Corporate Health, Safety and Wellbeing Consultative Committee of the 7th of December 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Perth Kinross Integration Joint Board 23rd of September 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Perth Kinross Integration Joint Board 9th of December 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Perth Kinross Integration Joint Board 17th of February 21. The minute of the meeting of the Tay City Region Joint Committee 21st of February 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Tay Cities Region Joint Committee 16th of June 20. The minute of the meeting of the Tay Cities Region Joint Committee 17th July 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Tay Cities Region Joint Committee 7th of September 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Tay Cities Region Joint Committee 11th of December 20. We have the minute of the meeting of the Tay Cities Region Joint Committee 22nd of January 21. We have the minute of the meeting of the Tay Cities Region Joint Committee of the 19th of February 21. We have the minute of the meeting of the Tay Cities Region Joint Committee 19th of March 21. So thank you for your patience. Are there any comments that anyone wishes to make on this? They haven't come in to date. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Murray. For the sake of completeness, unless I misheard, I think you missed out the minute of the meeting of the Appeals Subcommittee of 12 January 21.
My apologies for that. I'm not sure where I have missed that, but it's quite possible. And for completeness, thank you, Councillor Parrott. I shall note that the Appeals Subcommittee 21.
Thanks.
Thank you. So, given where we are, we now move on, if we can agree all these, having agreed all the minutes of these meetings, move on to item 4, which is authority to write off debts and obsolete stock. And we have a report introduction from the Head of Finance, Mr. Mackenzie.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, councillors. In preparing the Council's unaudited accounts for 2020-21, adjustments required to be made for the write-off of debt where the Council's statutory debt recovery processes have been exhausted. Most of the debt within this report predates 2021, and the Council continued to collect income throughout the whole of last financial year. However, in common with other Scottish local authorities, the proactive recovery of debt was temporarily suspended as resources were retasked to support the processing of business grants and to support early engagement with individuals and households impacted by the pandemic. Section 2 of the report and the attached appendices set out by income type the proposed write-off amounts to be reflected within the accounts and the reasons for non-recovery. Although the committee is asked to approve the write-off of debt for accounting purposes, should further information become available, council officers will seek to recover debt where it is cost effective to do so. The level of write-off is broadly similar to last year for sales ledger debt, but lower for council tax, non-domestic rates and housing rents. The level of write-off for local taxes in 2019-20 was, however, higher than usual as a result of a comprehensive review and reassessment of the likelihood of recovery for the most long-standing debt. The report also makes recommendations on the write-off of outstanding housing service charges, housing benefit overpayments, car parking income, equipment and stock. While the report is by necessity drafted in terms of amounts proposed for write-off, the Council continued to collect a very high proportion of its budgeted income. In-year collection levels in 2020-21 for council tax were 96.6%, for non-domestic rates 95.8%, and for housing rents 97%. As members will appreciate, both national and local measures have and continue to help support businesses and household incomes during the pandemic. As these schemes unwind and the full local impact of COVID emerges, there is, however, an expectation of future pressures upon the Council's income and potentially on the level and recovery of outstanding debt. Happy to take questions, Convener.
My apologies. I see we have some questions. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much, Convener. Thank you for that presentation. Can you say a bit more about the mechanics of the non-domestic rates write-off? My understanding of that is that we collect on behalf of Scottish Government, and I'm not quite sure about the process by which we write it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Park, for your question. And so some of the mechanics are summarised and outlined in the report, but I'll try and summarise. Broadly speaking, we collect non-domestic rates on behalf of the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government underwrite that collection at present to provide us with an overall guaranteed level of grant support. There are parameters around that, but we effectively collect on behalf of the Scottish Government. Within our accounts, we have to recognise non-domestic rates as part of our income stream and therefore treat it like another income source. But the cost of the non-collection is effectively borne by the Scottish Government. So it appears within the report, it's where the non-domestic rates appear to be recoverable, we make a recommendation for write-off. If further information becomes available, we will seek to pursue that income, but the actual cost to the council is borne by the Scottish Government. It's covered by the Scottish Government through the pooling mechanism.
So thanks, if I may. So the actual net cost to us in the end is zero. It's an accounting device.
At current, yes. At present, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Convener. My question is about section 2.1.3 of the report, which gives a useful summary of write-off by service. 3 out of those 4 are very straightforward for me, and I can see why we would be doing monetary collections in those services. However, the one that isn't so clear for me, and I couldn't find the answer to in the paper, is education and children's services. I wondered, could we have a bit of detail, please, on what are the sort of what are the things that the ECS charge for, and therefore that will help us to understand where those amounts arise from that we haven't been able to collect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Bearing in mind that this report relates to a number of previous financial years and not just 2021, which was a point I tried to stress in my introduction. So, for example, school-lets, instrumental music tuition, those are charges which education and children's services would raise. I assume there are ECS colleagues available if you're looking for more detail on the background to this, but those are the sorts of charges which are levied through sales ledger, and there is a recovery process where those amounts are not recovered. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That was what I needed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll just go with the first one just now. Stuart, section 1.6, you used the phrase scaled back. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what that might actually look like in real life.
So what we did, thank you for your question, Councillor Forbes. What we did was 2 things. There was a normal recovery process, and the recovery process involves sending out reminder letters. And we did that a little later, and we changed the language around the reminder letters because we were conscious at that point in time we would normally go out that households and indeed businesses would be struggling with the impact of pandemic. So we took we focused on engagement in terms of the language and the narrative around the recovery letters and the recovery process, the internal recovery process kicked off later last year than it normally would. The second thing was when that becomes formalised through sheriff officers, that engagement process was later than it normally would be in terms of pursuing outstanding debt. And just to provide some reassurance for elected members, we did ensure that our sheriff officers were COVID compliant, that they were aware of the requirements for PPE for social distancing and discharging their responsibilities, and also that there was no cross-boundary travel. So the sheriff officers were all locally based.
Okay, thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, and we'll come back to you later. Councillor Forbes. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. I wanted to ask with regard to paragraph 2.3.3 whether any of the write-off relates to any ongoing tenants of garages, or whether it's all former tenants of garages or garage lock-up sites.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett, for your question. I don't actually have that information to hand, but I wonder if colleagues could perhaps help. Michelle?
Yeah, just to come back and note, all this debt relates to former tenant rent accounts, so none of it relates to current rent accounts. The only point where we would write off a debt for a current tenant would be where that tenant had been legally sequestrated.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Convener. I wanted to refer to or ask a question regarding 2.5.1, the car park trading account income. I don't know previous year's figures other than the ones quoted there, obviously, but I see that almost 1 in 7 penalty charge notices is proposed that they be written off. This is a significant deterioration from the previous year, and this obviously is for 2019-20, so predates the lockdown period, etc. So I'm just wondering why such a deterioration, and what has been done to chase up on these PCNs, because it seems to me like 1 in 7 is a very high ratio.
Okay, thank you for your question.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. I don't know if colleagues from the communities wish to comment.
I think we have Fraser Croft able to comment.
Happy to come in. Thanks, Convener. Yes, the figure has increased from the previous year, from around about 10% up to just over 13%. The standard procedure is followed in terms of debt recovery. The process is set out in statute, and we follow that through in accordance with that. In terms of the numbers, the overall value of PCNs has increased over the last couple of years, and I think perhaps that's reflected in the percentage increase as well. We will continue to pursue these debts as we would any other debts. What it should be noted is that many of those debts which are unrecovered are from those from living out with the area, and as such it becomes a little more difficult, obviously, to pursue those. But we will continue to pursue the debt as we go forward.
Okay, just for clarification on the second part of Councillor Drysdale's question, are there any new actions that we are taking to try and recover that debt, or are we just continuing to pursue as previous?
Continue to pursue as previous, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Drysdale.
Yeah, well, if I'm permitted a comment at this stage, Councillor Lyle, that it seems to me it's maybe to call it a free-for-all is overstating it, but it does seem a very high proportion, and I would ask, please, that every effort be made to tighten up on this going forward, and as Fraser has said, to pursue recovery to all extents that we possibly can.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm aware it's probably been very difficult in the past year, obviously, but the paper itself deals with historic issues, and hopefully we can pursue them in the future. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener, again. I'm just wanting to talk a little bit about Appendix 2, and there's a table which is in deceased with no estate. I'm just really struggling to understand that, and I wonder if Stuart can explain that in a little bit more detail for me. For example, what the red bits on the first four lines mean, and why there was a significant jump in 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. I'm going to refer you to an expert. My colleague Lynn Brady, I think, is on the call. Lynn?
Yes. Hi there. Yeah. Hopefully I can help answer that, Councillor Forbes. The red bits are where we've written on the debt. So perhaps something's come back and we've clarified there is actually a state available that we could tap into in order to help clear the debt or to put money towards the debt. With regards to a deceased in no estate, that is where a person passes away and there is no estate.
Excuse me, can I interrupt? It's
yes, of course.
Quite difficult to hear what you're saying from my end anyway, and I'm aware if other councillors have the same issues. I wonder if you could just come a bit closer to the microphone.
Yeah, is that any better?
That's better.
Yeah. Okay, yes. Okay. The red bits in the column are where money has been written on. So we've perhaps had information back from a relative or from a solicitor, etc., and we've been able to recover some of that money or transfer money in from another year that's perhaps been overpaid, for example, and it reduces the write-off. Deceased and no estate just basically means that somebody has passed away and there is no estate, there is no money that we could legally tap into. And every time that somebody does pass away with council tax debt, we do make every effort to establish if there's a solicitor dealing with the estate, if there's any relatives, etc. And with regards to the comment about 2019, during that financial year, within revenues and benefits, we carried out a review and reassessment of an exercise of review and reassessment of all outstanding debt, basically trying to tidy it up. And as a result of that, there were more write-offs than normal during that financial year. Hopefully that answers your questions.
It does, Lynn. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any comments before we move the paper? No, I see no comments, so I now propose to move the paper. This report seeks approval to write off both debt and obsolete stock for the purposes of preparing the 2021 accounts. While the Council has a responsibility to collect all debt due to it, we have a good record in doing so. Members will appreciate that the focus over the last 12 months has been on engaging with and supporting those local households and businesses most affected by the COVID pandemic. On a like-for-like basis, the levels of write-offs are lower than in 1920 for council tax, non-domestic rates and housing rents. This is, however, largely due to the comprehensive review of outstanding debt, which was undertaken last year. In-year collection levels of council tax rates and rents have remained within a couple of percentage points of the last year, reflecting the positive impact of both national and local schemes to promote households and businesses during the pandemic. As the Head of Finance noted earlier, the full impact of the pandemic on the Council's income is, however, still extremely unclear, and we can reasonably anticipate some challenges in maintaining collection levels and recovering outstanding debts going forward. Happy to move the report.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Convener. As you've said, this is an annual paper which seeks approval to write off a certain amount of debt and obsolete stock for accounting purposes. However, these accounts are never closed, and every effort will continue to be made to recover these debts where it is cost effective. I'm grateful to the author, Lynn Law, Financial Systems Team Leader, and Mr Mackenzie for the report, and note that the level of outstanding debt recommended for write-off may increase over the next few years as the full impact of the pandemic is felt. I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you. I'm happy to agree.
Agree the report.
Thank you. We now move on to item 5, which is the missing shares scheme. And I'd ask Claire Mailer to introduce, please.
Thank you. Councillors, the report summarises the level of disrepair in flatted properties across the authority area and provides examples of typical defects causing building deterioration and an adverse public health impact on local residents, landlords and tenants. In most cases, owners can fund these communal repairs, but in some cases a minority of owners are either unwilling or unable to fund their share or are untraceable, thereby preventing the necessary repairs going ahead. Consequently, this results in a decline in local private housing conditions, and interventions are then required by a broad range of council services. An enforcement action is extremely resource intensive. Therefore, the Missing Shares scheme, proposed for a 2-year pilot period, aims to fund these minority shares to enable homeowners to undertake the necessary communal repairs themselves with minimal impact on council services. The costs incurred in funding any missing share are recoverable from the owner via a repayment charge attached to the title of the property, together with an administration charges and a reasonable level of interest. A missing shares technician is also sought as part of this pilot to ensure successful implementation and delivery of the scheme. The proposals contained within this report will enable a more preventative, cost-effective and proactive approach to be taken, contributing towards our overarching ambitions to provide good quality, sustainable homes across Perth and Kinross. Kirsty, Stephen and myself will be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? I see Councillor Ahern.
Thank you very much, Convener. I really welcome this scheme and something I've been after for a long time. My questions with regards to timescales and how long it will take to implement the scheme, and whether any delays will be down to employing the missing shares technician.
Okay, thank you. Claire?
Yes, I will pass to Kirsty. We will certainly move very quickly to employ the missing shares technicians so that we can start implementation as quickly as possible. Kirsty, I don't know if you want to come in with any more detail in terms of timescales.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Councillor Ahern. Yes, it will simply be getting a technician employed, and then we'll be able to progress quite quickly. We have policies and procedures in place at the moment because we've piloted a couple of these projects, and I also have a waiting list of about 15 to 20 inquiries to work on. So yeah, we hope we can get started fairly sharply.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. Can I clarify in my own mind, if you like, exactly what we're doing by way of pilots and if you like, approved schemes? I have to admit that I was a little surprised to see this paper, because I thought from my previous experience that we already had a missing shares scheme. That would appear to have been the cases of where the previous pilot scheme was being used. But then Claire has just referred to this particular scheme as a pilot too. So I'm wondering at what stage we get to the point where we might consider a fully implemented missing shares scheme. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. My understanding, and I'll pass over to Claire in a second, my understanding, Councillor Parrott, is that this is a 2-year pilot which will enable us to quantify the need, I think, going forward, and then we can put a more fulsome proposal in place. But Claire.
Thank you, Councillor Parrott, and Councillor Lyle, you have actually answered the question there in terms of, yes, previously what we have undertaken is, as Kirsty's alluded to, is we've undertaken missing shares almost on an ad hoc basis. The pilot will enable us really to sort of consolidate procedures and processes, and as Councillor Lyle explained, really understand sort of the ongoing need. So our absolute anticipation is that this will become a permanent feature and a continuation, but what we need to do is sort of test out some of the procedures, the approach, the budget spend, evaluate the impact of the scheme, and then come back with further proposals going forward. Kirsty, I don't know if there's anything else to add to that.
No, that's covered it. We've simply carried out 2 almost case study pilots, I would say, just to ensure that we do have the appropriate procedures in place, and you know, the works were carried out as we expected, and that was the case. It was fulfilled, and that's why we feel more confident about moving forward with the actual scheme itself.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And I greatly welcome moving from an ad hoc scheme to a more formalised pilot scheme. I hope that proves successful and we can implement, if you like, an ongoing scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Convener. First of all, I'm glad we've got clarification that we're going to move from ad hoc to this on a much more sustained basis. Can I actually ask on the cost? 200,000 is allocated for 2021-2023, 100,000 per annum. Clearly, the new missing shares technician is going to be, from what I understand here, a new position. Do council officers believe that is going to be sufficient on a sustained basis for the scheme to be effective? In other words, in the first and second years, what do they anticipate the cost of the scheme to be?
Okay, thank you. I'll ask Claire to answer that question. There has been some comparative work done with Glasgow, but Claire.
So
Yes, and again, Kirsty might want to come in with a little bit more detail, but in terms of the assessment, in terms of pulling this report together, based on the two case studies that Kirsty described and our understanding of a benchmarking with other local authorities, and indeed in terms of the ongoing need, our understanding, our assessment has been that the budget identified will be sufficient, but through the pilot scheme and in terms of demand and response, we will obviously tease that out, and it will be, you know, a constant process of evaluation. Again, Kirsty, I don't know if there's anything that I've missed there that you would like to add to that.
No, it would just be a case of evaluating the demand.
could I just follow up? The reason
Yes.
I did ask is I saw that obviously the figures for Glasgow, and that's going back to 2011-12 and effectively 10 years. But why I wondered if the funds allocated here are going to be sufficient is really what is set out in 1.1 of this report, and the figures are very stark. 2,129 properties requiring showing extensive disrepair. There's a significant backlog. So really, to what extent, once the scheme's up and running, we have to catch up with effectively a backlog, because it does seem to me repairs and maintenance is something that isn't, you know, to shirk on that, it really is a false economy.
Okay, thank you. Kirsty, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, I mean, we regularly receive contact from inquiries or complainants regarding disrepair and their frustration at not being able to progress it because there's this minority share that can't be paid, hence the reason for the scheme. But it is the minority. You know, a lot of responsible homeowners do tackle the work themselves. It is a last resort by the time they come to us. On saying that, as I mentioned previously, we do have a list of about 15 to 20 properties that I have in front of me here that we know are waiting on the missing share scheme coming into place. What we will do, though, is we will probably have to look, in order that that £200,000 isn't spent on 4 new roofs, for example, is that we will perhaps look at a minimum and maximum missing share spend in order that we can get the money out to as many people as possible. So those approaches have still just to be refined.
Yeah, I think my other comment to that, Councillor Donaldson, and this is more appropriate for the committee in the future, if we find that we are short of resource going forward, and there is something that it is quite possible to bring something back to the SP&R committee to review it within the 2-year pilot, if we find we have a significant challenge. But I would expect, given that we've done some research work, that the funding available hopefully will suffice to get us through the pilot scheme so that we can quantify the need accurately in the future. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you very much indeed to Claire and Kirsty. I think this is an excellent report. I'm glad to see this coming forward. I would like to ask a question to get a little bit more understanding on what we do if in trying to recoup funds from owners. Whilst I understand the report is very clear that we can put in an interest charge and we can secure that against the property, but we've just had a paper on bad debt, and we've just had an increase in issues concerning COVID and people's changes in circumstances. So can I have a little bit more information on how we intend to recoup some of the money, and what our contingency is if we find ourselves in a position of complete bad debt, because securing on properties is a very long, drawn out process to try and recoup funds. So if I can give a little bit more information on that, please.
Okay, thank you. Kirsty?
Yes, I wonder if I could actually pass that question over to one of my finance colleagues who might be able to provide a fuller response.
Absolutely. Anyone that can answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you, Councillor McCall. Essentially, the debt is secured on the property, as you said. So the legislation and its special provisions on the Housing Act allow us to, in fact, probably require us to set up a schedule of repayment. If the participants involved don't meet that repayment schedule, we'd obviously seek to engage with them in the first instance and try and establish why and remedy that situation. But ultimately, the debt is secured on the property, and as you said, quite rightly, that can be a very long drawn-out process. So, to be clear, there is an element of risk in terms of providing this support. However, as colleagues have been at pains to stress, this is a small minority of cases, and it can have a significant impact. Ultimately, it is a secured debt, and that would also depend on where we sat in the list of creditors, because it's unlikely that we'd be the only debt secured against the property. It may be mortgages, there may be other debt secured against the property. That's the reality of where we are. So there is financial risk in this, but the gearing effect in terms of the amount of remediation work, which might be funded by providing a little bit of support, decision for the committee may merit a risk. And there's certainly evidence of successful practice in other local authorities.
Yeah, sorry, my apologies, Convener, and thank you very much for that answer. For clarity, I'm not in any way concerned that we don't move forward with the scheme. I just wanted to know what our ideas and provision were on the bad debt side. So thank you very much indeed for that answer.
Councillor Shires.
Thank you. Councillor Lyle, my question is partly answered already, but the second part of my question is about the reporting back on this. This is obviously something that across the board we're all welcoming, the move from something ad hoc to more structured, and we're anticipating that it's going to. And I'm wondering what the reporting back to committee structure will be, so that if it is successful, we'll be able to. And you kind of alluded to that in your comments. But is there scope for a report to come back in a year's time, or as an interim measure, so that we were able to monitor it?
I think thank you for your question. I think I'll take that one myself. I think one of the things we evaluated when we were discussing this previously was that there is a need for space here to just allow some of these processes that are already in train with some of the properties mentioned by Kirsty do take time, and I think that's why we put a pilot in scheme, so that we could have a scheme, bring it to an end, quantify it, and then evaluate it appropriately for the council, so that we know how much resource it would require, and also at that point we'd be able to evaluate the benefits that we'd had to certain homeowners by just giving the others giving them that ability to repair their property when they've been struggling.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. I was just reading paragraph 1.1, and the very last line says a total of 54% of flatted properties were deemed below the repairing standard. So two quick questions on that. Is 54% fairly much in line with other local authorities? And who sets the repairing standard?
Okay.
Kirsty.
I'm happy to answer that question, thank you. The riparian standard, first of all, is actually the standard applied to rented property. So that's a riparian standard guidance for landlords. So that figure actually states that, you know, a significant number of rented properties are actually deemed below that riparian standard. So that's tenants that are living in properties that don't meet those that level of living. And sorry, I don't have, in relation to other authorities, the comparison figure, but I can get that for you.
Can I have a quick follow-up, convener?
Okay.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Kirsty. So, who determines what a riparian standard is? Is that something set by government that all landlords, yes, including local authorities, would have to comply with?
Yes, absolutely. It's a national standard.
Thank you. And don't worry about getting me the exact details, but just if you happen to have a feeling, is 54% pretty much where everybody else is, or do you genuinely have no idea?
I genuinely have no idea. I wouldn't like to say.
That's fine. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Lane.
Thanks, convener, and apologies if this question's been asked already, but it's dropping in and dropping out here a little bit. I totally welcome this scheme coming forward. I think it's a really good idea. My only concern is, what is the risk that once this is known in the general public that this scheme is here, that people who are swithering whether to fund it themselves decide not to, in the hope to be able to attract funding from the scheme? I know they'll have to pay it back, but it'd be like paying it back over a longer time, and as we said, it might be difficult to recover the money. So I would just like the officers to tell me what risks they think, if any, that this could happen. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for your question. Kirsty?
Yes, I don't think we want to make this an easy option. As I described in the report, the majority of times, by the time people come to you, it is that little last resort situation. But I understand where you're coming from. Once this scheme actually becomes known in the wider sort of area, then it's possible people may come to us. However, the downside of it is that there is an interest charge, and there is also an administration charge. So it would actually cost slightly more for everybody involved to take this route, as opposed to taking on the responsibility themselves.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks very much, convener. Councillor Donaldson and Councillor Shires have covered some of the ground that I wanted to. You know, I think as a council we've been too slow and too risk averse with our approach to missing shares. I think that's been due to finance officers and their risk-averse approach. It's also been due to a lack of political commitment and drive over 2 council terms. So I'm really pleased to hear your comments that this is going to be reported regularly to SP&R, and hopefully councillors will be in the driving seat when it comes to increasing the amount of money should that be required. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you. If anyone else would like to add comments, I'm happy to take comments now. Comment, Councillor Forbes and Councillor Wilson. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, convener. I was pleased to see Councillor Barrett taking us straight into the comment section there rather than the questions, but I really welcome this. I've actually found it much more interesting than I imagined I would, and my only concern has already been alluded to by Councillor Barrett and I think Councillor Shires, is that perhaps people may decide just push the boundaries a little bit if they know the council are ultimately going to pay for this, although I understand that we will eventually be pursuing them. So a good report. Welcome the initiative. I think it's the right direction. I have a couple of slight concerns, but good work.
I think yes. I think we've all had some concerns when we saw this initially, but when I've seen the excellent results that it's achieved elsewhere, I have grown in confidence. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, convener. I give this scheme and what's in it wholehearted support. Of course, there might be concerns, but I have a bigger concern that we've got deteriorating properties and we haven't been proactive enough in the past as a council to get things done. This will help accelerate it. We've heard from Kirsty that there's a waiting list virtually. That's a good thing. When the technicians are appointed, they're going to have to hit the ground running, I think, because there's going to be a full entry before they even start. Questions about finance in the future? Yes, if it succeeds and we need more money, we can look at that situation. And answers about future years, well, that'll be up to political decisions, convener. If it does succeed and it's working and we're improving living conditions for folk, and some of these folk are maybe in relative poverty, then that'll be a good thing for our society in general. I warmly welcome it. We've had experience of ad hoc success of this in a building right across from the high street where we might return one day, and within half an hour of the SBNR committee that you were chairing, convener, make that decision, then the person had agreed to carry it out, and that was on the basis of a phone call. So I warmly welcome the scheme. I wish it every success, and I hope to get a positive report in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, convener. I agree with most of what Mr. Councillor Wilson said there, but I don't agree that it's a good thing that we have a long waiting list. I think that's a bad thing. It was useful that the scheme can get up and running very quickly. I welcome it. Have little concerns that are raised, but overall it's something we should be doing because it's a spend to save scheme. And it's saving housing stock, and we're short of that anyway, affordable housing stock or whatever housing stock. So totally support it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much, convener. Yeah, I'd like to add my wholehearted support for this scheme. I hope the trial or the pilot is successful and we can move to if you like, a fully rolled out scheme. And I make the assumption that in due course, if we do that, the financial arrangements for such a scheme will essentially be self-contained and self-financing. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you. A lot of good things already been said about this convener, and they were said on Monday at the Housing Committee as well. I think when it comes to the debt aspect of this, there's obviously the possibility of offering buyback. These are ex-council houses, and we could bring them back into our stock for much needed social rent should the owners not be able to afford to upkeep them and afford to pay our debt. So there's always other options down the line that we can look at for this. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. There are opportunities with it, which I'm aware, and hopefully we'll be able to evaluate them and bring them back in 2 years' time when we complete this pilot. So if no further comments, I'm happy to move the paper. I think this is a really important paper for the council, and I'm glad to see it's come before us today. The implementation of a missing shares scheme would demonstrate that the council's ongoing commitment to support improved housing standards in the area by supporting local homeowners into action to resolve communal disrepair at an early stage and minimise the impact on council services. Several other Scottish councils have already implemented such a scheme successfully. We are asked to consider and approve recommendations to implement a mission shares scheme to be operated by regulatory services for a trial period of 2 years. Funding for the pilot would be capped at 200,000 and underwritten by a council's affordable housing earmarked reserve fund. You are also asked to consider and approve that funds from the council's affordable housing earmarked reserve are used to employ a missing shares technician for a 2-year pilot period at a cost of approximately 40,000 per year. I'm delighted to move the paper. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, convener. The benefits of this scheme have, I believe, been well evidenced, and I hope that this may become a permanent arrangement in future. We know from a survey that there could be as many as 14,000 flats or tenemental properties in Perth and Carnos which are exhibiting visible or extensive disrepair, and that these situations are likely to adversely affect people's health and well-being and place the residents under considerable stress. I'm certain that our proposals today will be well received, and have much pleasure in seconding the report.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we agree the paper?
Agreed.
Great, thank you.
Agreed.
Now move on to item 6, and I'd like to ask Councillor Duff if he could take this item, please.
Thank you, Convener. Item 6 is a report on the Community Investment Fund for 2021-22, and I'd ask Claire Mailer to introduce the report.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillors, this report summarises the progress to date with the Community Investment Fund. The Community Investment Fund has invested 1.2 million in over 200 community projects across Perth and Kinross. The report sets out the impact of the Community Investment Fund in terms of the geographical spread of investment, the distribution of funding across different sectors, and the impact on key issues. Monitoring to date suggests that almost 25,000 people across Perth and Kinross have benefited from a Community Investment Fund funded project, and over 1,600 have volunteered to support their delivery. The report highlights some of the key issues that have arisen during the delivery of the 3 rounds of CIF so far, and seeks committee approval for some changes for 21-22. The proposed changes focus on the distribution of funding across multi-member wards, the criteria for assessing applications, and the decision-making process. Lee Haxton, David Stoko and myself are happy to answer any questions you may have, and we're aiming to open CIF for 21-22 for applications from Monday the 14th of June. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Are there any questions on this report? Give it a second. I'm not seeing any questions. Okay, if there, Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I note that we've got in section 2 on the impact of the Community Investment Fund, we can see the geographical distribution, the types of organisations that have received the funds so far, the sectors, and what sort of equality themes it's being committed against. I just wondered, I think that we were to receive, I'm not sure if we have done, a report detailing some of the outcomes. So from the monitoring that applicants have to, the monitoring forms that the applicants have to return, whether there was some sort of report in the pipeline detailing that the outcomes, you know, what had actually been achieved and what the benefits were from the spend in the fund so far.
Okay, Claire, are you able to help us with that one?
Yes, as councillors will be aware, previous monitoring very much has focused on asking the funded projects to provide information on what the funds have been spent on, how many people that they feel have benefited from the project, and how many people have benefited or have volunteered to support projects. Given the diverse nature and relative size of CIF funded projects, the impacts, as you'll see within the report, are very difficult to monitor. We know that the overall impacts in terms of community engagement, involvement and feedback from communities has been really positive. In terms of the more detailed report, I don't know, Lee, if you've got any comment in terms of more detailed report in terms of the outcome monitoring. What I would say to committee is that going forward, we hope to get more detailed information back and better assess actually the impact on communities, but that will probably be in the collective rather than on an individual project basis, because some of the projects are so small in nature. The real impact on community outcomes is really difficult to sort of drill down. Lee, have you got anything else to add to that?
Not really, Claire, to be honest. I think you've covered it in that the number of the projects that have been funded and their relative size, I think the average award has been about £6,000. So it would be very, very difficult to attribute any change in strategic outcomes to a small community project which is designed to benefit a small area. We have the monitoring information that we have, and as it suggests, the overall feedback has been largely positive. I can't say much more than that just now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stewart, are you happy with that?
Thanks for that.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Ling.
Thanks very much, Vice Convener. My questions, it's a couple of questions rolled in at one. Hopefully you'll allow that. I see that the criteria in the assessment is to continue to use the local action plan priorities, but as the administration has ceased to fund the local action partnership for this coming year, I was wondering why we didn't continue with the local action partnership, which was specifically aimed for reducing inequalities. And I asked this question at the last committee, but the head of service didn't have an answer to that at that time. But she did say to me that because the reason why the administration had cut funding was that funding could be levered in to local action partnerships from other means. And I asked how much had been levered in or come in from other sources apart from the council since it had been started, and the answer I received was zero. Could somebody just clarify the reasons why we're going down this line and what the funding that we have had come into the local partnerships, which will now look as though they will wither on the vine? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Claire, can you take that one, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Lane. As councillors will be aware, the local action partnerships have received a significant amount of funding over the course of a number of years, I think to the tune of 450,000. The community investment funding will be available to local action partnerships and indeed wider community groups, so it will have that much wider reach in terms of access to the fund. During this year, we'll obviously continue to evaluate the impact and indeed the wider sort of pot of funding that is available to all community groups, and indeed including local action partnerships. And as we I think assess the impact of COVID and continue to recover from the COVID pandemic and step into working more closely with and within our communities through the offer, we'll continue to evaluate the whole situation and the need for funding across a range of community groups going forward. Local action partnerships have levered in some funding from other groups. They obviously have got access to common good funding as well. Lee, I don't know if you've got any more detailed information in terms of access to wider funding that local action partnerships have been accessing in recent years. I would also add as well, in terms of the local action partnerships, there has been a significant underspend within some local action partnerships during the course of the last year or so as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Excuse me, sorry, Convener, that didn't answer any of the questions. She asked, Claire asked to pass it over to Lee, and it didn't answer how much funding was levered in. From common good funds, we only have one common good that actually pays out, which is Perth. So I asked for a figure of how much had been levered in, and she did say that she'd pass it to Lee. Sorry, Convener.
I beg your pardon. Mr. Haxton, are you able to assist?
Yes, the funding that was alluded to in the previous conversation that Councillor Lane refers to, the best example that we have is the Community Choices Fund, which was a national pot provided by Scottish Government to support participatory budgeting at a local level. Councillors will remember that we had 2 rounds of participatory budgeting in Perth and Kinross back in, I think it was 2016-17 and 2017-18, and the council was able to secure largely that funding on the basis that we had a local vehicle in place, local action partnerships. The exact figure I would need to dig out, but it was approximately £300,000 that we received for the Community Choices Fund over those 2 years.
Thank you. The answer is since then, which was a Scottish Government thing, the answer I'm getting given is, although there's no money at local action partnerships, they will be able to continue levering in money. I'm asking how many they've managed, because they've got to fill in the application themselves, not through the council. How much have they managed since 2017? Because we're talking about funding that we gave them and we've removed, and we're dancing on the head of a pin here. I'd just like a figure of how much the local action partners themselves. Thank you.
I wonder if I could ask Claire, are there any local action partnerships now which have no funds available to them?
I understand that of the funds that of the local action partnerships from last year, we had 127 projects 27 had been completed during last year and 100 delayed. So we've got a significant number of projects that are being carried forward. And my understanding is that all local action partners currently have funding within the pot and will have access to the SIF funding going forward. Lee, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, Claire, is that the local action partnerships, as you say, have been given funding over previous financial years. The current state of play is there's actually a disparity between them. The Perth City Action Partnership, for example, is quite low in funds. I think it has less than £1,000, but some of the other local action partnerships still have approximately £30,000 plus. It just depends on how they've used their money over the last year or two.
Okay, thank you. I have a point of order from Councillor McCall.
Yeah, sorry, thank you, convener. I'm slightly confused. I thought the paper was regarding SIF and SIF funding and whether we're using the local action partnerships to get that out or not. I'm confused by this line of questioning. I really think that we're here to talk about SIF and the Community Investment Fund and how we get that out, and I'm completely off the track here with the questioning that we're going through. Just because we use the action partnerships to do that, the two things are not the same.
Thank you, Councillor McCall, and accept the point you're making. Councillor Lang, you've had a response to the question you asked about local action partnerships. If you are satisfied with where things are at, we will move on. And I'll ask Councillor Bailey for his question, please.
Thank you. Given that this funding was billed as helping tackle inequalities, I'm really surprised that there's no assessment of how effective it has been at doing so. Was any attempt made to assess the recipients of this funding by the SIMD measure of multiple deprivation for their locality and not brought before this committee? And I'd really like an answer on that very specific point. I'm aware that there were concerns about how effective that data will be, but I'd like an answer, please, on specifically whether the assessment was done in the office and not brought before the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Claire, are you able to take that one, please?
Lee, are you able to take that question in terms of the detail drill down?
Yes, it's just to clarify, Councillor Bailey, sorry, so you're asking whether or not there was an assessment of the recipients of the fund and their relation to SIMD, or was it the impact of the projects with regard to SIMD?
So I think the first thing you mentioned, so I'll sort of restate it to help. So it would be interesting to know for each of the places that was funded with the SIF monies, what SIMD index are they within? So essentially a bit like we've done the analysis by type of organisation, it would be interesting to see a similar analysis by SIMD grouping.
Thank you for the clarity. The short answer is no, we don't have that, but as we have, as you can see in the report, a map of where each of the funded projects sits geographically, I think we can ask colleagues in GIS to overlay that against SIMD and share that if you're interested to see it.
That'd be most interesting as a follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I heard your response to Councillor McCall, but I do say I do not think that we can divorce entirely something entirely separate, SIFs, from local action partnerships. And it really is of concern. I think what would be useful is we could be circulated to all councillors the current funds available in each of the local action partnerships. I think, for instance, Strathern Strathallan is of the order of 18,000 at present. But I think the two go together, and clearly the local action partnerships do have a link in very much to SIFs. So it's a specific request and to ask, can we get those up-to-date figures circulated? I think it would be helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I'm sure that we can do that. Claire.
Yes, we'll happily do that. We'll pull together for an elected member briefing an overview of, I think, a detailed through all the local action partnerships, the spend to date, the underspend that is being carried forward, and I think a detail. I think I mentioned the 127 projects. and the 100 that are being carried forward. So we'll give details of the projects that are being carried forward into the current year, mainly obviously due to delays due to COVID.
Okay, Mike, be helpful.
Thank you for that. I'm not seeing any further questions then. Are there any comments in relation to the report? Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener. Just by way of comment, it does concern me that essentially the £600,000 here in this year and previous funds, where, if you like, we are not measuring the impact in any substantive way, and I wonder if that can be addressed for the future. I also have reservations about the funding allocation method and the disparity that creates between different areas, and I do wonder whether that can be looked at again for the future and refined, possibly against perception of impact. And it does worry me that we are prioritising the SIF scheme, which leaves action partnerships reactive to application, when more general funding or direct funding of the action partnerships enables the action partnerships to be proactive in responding to local needs. And I do note, in terms of the comment that has been made about monies available to action partnerships, the Perth City Action Partnership essentially is without funds at the moment, having dispersed the funds previously allocated. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shires. Councillor Shires, you may be on mute. Is Councillor Shires still with us? Has she dropped out? Okay, can I move to Councillor Wilson in the meantime, please? And I'll see if we can get Councillor Shires back in.
Yes, Vice Convener, I'm here. I'm pleased to report. I welcome the paper. I welcome the discussion. It's a pity that we've had some negative comments about it. I see there's a positivity about this and moving forward and trying to make adjustments in the current situation. I take on board Councillor Parrott's comments that this isn't set in stone, and we need to be nimble and flexible about how we approach these funds in the future. But it's good to see the subject being brought up. It's good to have the questions, and I think there was some perceptive questions on what's the impact. Could we get some feedback on how this is affecting people's lives? And just as in the previous paper, we're here to improve folks' lives. I'm sorry that Councillor Lang has chosen to take this paper as something that's negative, and I certainly see it as a positive issue and one that we should be supporting. And of course we'll keep it under close review and find out if it's working and we're getting the net benefit that we all expect out of it. So I'm very happy to support the paper and welcome it and hope it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Councillor Shires back amongst us? Thank you. That's okay. Your comment, please.
Looking for funding sources for improved broadband. My comment was along the lines, I think I picked up Councillor Wilson's final comments there, but at 2.3 in the report, where it talks about nearly 1,700 volunteers supporting project delivery of the SIF. That's really what this is all about. It's actually about engaging with the people in our communities that know our communities best and are delivering the stuff that the communities want to see done. And so much of this, if there was a report put together by officers just sometime around before the election, and it really highlighted the positive good news stories that this relatively small pot of money in the scheme of our pots of council cash, which have been pretty much hacked about by the Scottish Government over previous years, and these relatively small pots of money that have actually made a huge difference and have been delivered on with the support of volunteers out in our communities, and that should be the positive bottom line story of the Community Investment Fund. And I really welcome this report and hope that this is something that we can look to grow as the years go by, and hopefully our financial settlement improves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shash. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. I do worry that the Community Investment Fund so far has proven to have a sort of reverse Robin Hood effect on the people of Perth and Kinross, and is set to continue to do so. Council tax is a regressive tax that hits the poorest in our communities the hardest, yet the Liberal Democrat and Tory members here consistently vote to increase it. They then spend the money raised on things like this Community Investment Fund. The papers in front of us today contain no assessment of the impact of the Community Investment Fund on inequalities. However, it's plain to see the well-to-do rural areas have historically received more cash per head and will continue to do so under this new arrangement. The rebalancing of allocations proposed in this paper has a smoothing effect, but this fund would still be better named the RRH, not the CIF, the Reverse Robin Hood Fund. Thank you.
Councillor Ling.
Whilst I welcome this funding that can help volunteer groups, etc., communities to do stuff themselves, I'm disappointed that is at the demise of the funding for the local action partnerships. We're told that at every other meeting that the problem with getting funding out the door was because of COVID, and I think that's probably part of the reason with local action partnerships not spending their funding last year. I see that Perth is down at £1,000, so they will have no local action partnership funding. It looks as though this administration is going to let this wither on the vine, and I'm really disappointed that Councillor McCall cannot have the foresight to see the connection between the two funds and the overlap between the two funds, which is astonishing. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any further. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Convener. So I did ask about outcomes from the CIF, the community investment funds that had already been allocated, and I think that some of the sorry, there seems to be some back.
Sorry, I think if Councillor Lane could mute, please.
Local action partnership.
Councillor Lane, could you mute, please? Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I think that some of the comments and questions have really, as Councillor Shire said, undermined the incredibly valuable work that is being done by our communities, facilitated by the Community Investment Fund. So I'm going to, it's invidious to pick a particular project, but I'm going to be invidious and pick one in particular. On the ward panel that I chaired, I think the highest scoring project that we reviewed, and remembering that it was members of the community who made up the ward panels and scored these projects. The highest scoring one that I saw in the first 2 years of the Community Investment Fund was for Kettins Parish Hall. We are getting a brand new hall next to the sports pitch in Kettins. It is it's got all sorts of brand new facilities, sports facilities, changing facilities, kitchen, meeting space for the community to come together to be able to book out and do activities on an ongoing basis. That is a significant, we're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of money that the community went out and raised itself and engaged architects, engaged builders, put this project up, and next month in July the project is going to be opening, and that has been facilitated by, if I recall correctly, it was a £15,000 contribution from the Community Investment Fund. But those facilities are going to be there for, not just 1 year or 18 months. They're going to be there for 20, 30, 50 years, and they're going to be available to everybody who lives in the community and the wider area beyond even the the specific Kettins area, so people will be able to travel and use those facilities. This is a great example of actually the administration taking funds, taking public funds and making them available for communities to come forward and say, we have this great idea, we need some leverage to make it happen, and to allow communities to take the lead in deciding what their local priorities are, what will help in their local area. And a project like this is going to help with mental health and well-being. It's going to help with social isolation, particularly as we come out of the pandemic. This is a really great example of how the Community Investment Fund is leveraging the diversity and innovation that resides within our communities, and I wholeheartedly commend the ongoing investment that this administration is making in the people of Perth and Kinross and in the communities through this Community Investment Fund.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I find myself agreeing with Councillor Wilson, and I suspect that may worry him almost as much as it worries me. But this is a good news story, and it should be a good news story, and we should talk about it as a good news story. And the item that Councillor Stewart has just outlined is just one of many, and we should talk about them, and we should continue to talk about them. I'm really disappointed at the line of questioning from Councillor Lang and to some extent from Councillor Bailey, who want to just drag the negativity of everything into this. And life is about choices, Vice Convener. I'm sure you agree. And if we want to do things like abandon 14 million spend on roads, we could maybe put more money into this. If we want to abandon the skills passport, we could put some more money into this. But the reality, as Councillor Shire's outlined, our grant from the Scottish Government goes down year on year, and we simply don't have the funds to do everything that we want to do. But let's talk about the positivity of this, because it is a good news story.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. I'm not seeing any further comments being requested, so at that point I shall move the paper. The Community Investment Fund is a great example of community empowerment in action, and this report sets out the significant impact that CIF investments have had right across Perth and Kinross. Members are asked to consider and approve the recommendations for key changes to the CIF process for 2021-22, namely the changes to the funding distribution across Perth and Kinross, the use of the themes of the Perth and Kinross offer, and the priorities of the Local Outcomes Improvement Plan as assessment criteria, and rationalising the governance of CIF in order to speed up the decision-making process. Members are also asked to consider and approve some other adjustments for CIF 2021-22 as well. These will merge the three Perth City wards into one larger CIF pot for the city and ensure that only community-controlled groups can lead bids for funding. Convener, the Community Investment Fund is an extremely positive impact on communities across Perth and Kinross, and I'm very happy to move the report. Councillor Lyle, can you second, please? Councillor Lyle, are you on mute?
My apologies to all. But happy to second. The Community Investment Fund has had a significant positive impact in all areas of Perth and Kinross, and I welcome this paper. Community Investment Fund will play an important part as we develop the Perth and Kinross offer in the future, and I'm happy to second the paper.
Thank you, Convener. That concludes paper 6, and I'll hand back to you for the final paper of this morning.
Thank you very much. Move on to paper 7 this morning, which is the Corporate Workforce Plan 2021-23. And I ask Cam Donaldson if she could introduce for us, please.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Our staff are our greatest asset. We knew this before the COVID pandemic. However, this has even been more evident over the last 15 months or so, with our staff showing tremendous flexibility and adaptability in terms of the roles they have undertaken, the new skills and knowledge they have learned, embracing new ways of working to keep everyone safe, and often working way beyond contracted hours to ensure essential services were delivered to the people of Perth and Kinross, and with significant discretionary effort. You will recall that we have shared many examples across all council areas with elected members at both council and committee meetings, and I know that we're all hugely appreciative of what has been achieved so far, working with our partners and with our committees. Today's report is about looking ahead to the council workforce of the future, to ensure we have the right people with the right skills in the right place and at the right time. Our new corporate workforce plan builds on all that we have achieved through the previous workforce plans, and importantly takes stock of our experiences and learning over the period of the pandemic. It's vital that we sustain the positive changes we have made in how we work and develop our workforce practices, our employment framework, policies and procedures to ensure that our workforce is aligned with how the council will modernise and adapt how it works as the Perth and Kinross offer itself is developed. There are three main themes in the corporate workforce plan: building agility, evolving our talent and refreshing our employment offer. There has been extensive consultation to ensure the plan meets the needs of an organisation with such a diverse workforce. The plan has a 2-year horizon in terms of what we will deliver and what changes will be evident, and it also sets out some longer term actions which set the direction for workforce development. A more detailed action plan assigning responsibility, timescales and the measures we will use to evaluate success has been developed to support delivery of the overarching plan. And it's proposed that we ask Scrutiny Committee to review performance against the plan on an annual basis. And it's important that we adjust and adapt the plan to meet emerging circumstances. The report also references a new project, Working Smarter for Perth and Kinross, which recognises the interconnectedness of workforce, digital and use of property. Working smarter means being more flexible about when, where and how we use space and technology and people to find new and more effective ways of doing things, building on what has happened over the pandemic. Staff, trade unions and elected members will be key consultees as this work develops and further reports brought back to elected members in due course. The report therefore seeks approval of the Corporate Workforce Plan 21-23 and the commencement of the Working Smarter for Perth and Kinross project. I'm joined today at committee by Camelia Judge, Team Leader in Human Resources, who has responsibility for resourcing and who has taken a lead role in developing the Corporate Workforce Plan. Both Camelia and I are happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. And we have questions first from Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. I know we're only allowed one question at a time, and I've got a couple, but I'm going to kind of, I think, composite them into what it says in the report.
We have time if you wish to come back later as well.
Okay, but I think I can deal with them as a kind of double barrel thing because they are closely linked. I'm looking at building in agility and evolving our talent. First of all, what assurances can we get in terms of agility in using our workforce, some of whom have been retasked, some of whom have had to change jobs because of previous commitments, some of whom have had to change their roles, that we're approaching a flexible and agile situation towards helping them manage that change. That's the first part of it. And linked into that, as far as evolving our talent, and as it has a wider application, Karen, the one bit of this that I don't think is emphasised enough is supporting our health and well-being of our staff. Of course it's mentioned, but it's something, and linking that in with our staff development processes. Would you like to comment on how much effort we're making as an organisation to help people through the huge change process that we forced upon us, and we're forcing ourselves upon us to some degree, and linking in the issue about agility and change for people and the helping support people with their health and well-being?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Wilson. I will do my best to give a composite answer to your composite questions. I think we do recognise that many staff have been retasked and taken on new roles and responsibilities, and they were supported in doing that. We had quite comprehensive training plans in place for staff who were retasked to work within social care roles. So there was a programme of training, including on learning and some face-to-face training when it involved moving and handling. So all staff who were moved to social care roles undertook quite comprehensive training to equip them for those roles. And other staff who have worked on new tasks and taken on additional work were equally supported. And at all times we have focused on health and well-being, and there have been extensive additional measures and support put in place across the organisation. Health and well-being is at the core of what we do as an organisation for our residents in Perth and Kinross, and equally for our employees. So it is very much uppermost in our mind. It's not referenced as much within the corporate workforce plan because it is referenced significantly elsewhere. And I draw your attention to the health and wellbeing framework that was approved in 2018, and that effectively sets out all of our commitments under health and wellbeing, looking at emotional, physical, mental and financial wellbeing. And there are quite detailed action plans that have been developed over the period of the pandemic to provide support for employees so they can self-serve and access the support at a time and a place when they choose. We have arranged support for managers so that they are better equipped to support the health and well-being of their employees. And I hope that that has been evident to many councillors who will have also had the opportunity to take part in some of our wellbeing conferences and events as well. So in terms of help to people for that evolving talent, then it is very much part of our ongoing work to encourage staff to take on new roles with training and support. And perhaps it's appropriate also to mention induction at this time as well, because we are in very different times and we realise that we have to induct employees who are new to the organisation or taking on new roles. And we've had to look at much more flexible and agile ways of doing that. So teams have developed their own approaches based on the work that's involved to ensure that employees are supported in new roles. And while it has been difficult, our staff have risen to the challenge, and we have many positive stories from staff who have taken on new roles and expressed some of the difficulties, but also very appreciative of the efforts that their new line managers have made. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. That's a good introduction to possible discussion we might have in the future, Karen. Thank you. Cheers.
Okay. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Convener. I have two questions. The second I'll ask after others have had the opportunity to ask their questions.
Thank you for your courtesy.
Question number one is, we state in the report 2.4, a new digital strategy is currently being developed. There is a little bit more under 3.2, but not an awful lot in the actual workforce plan. Can I just ask Karen Donaldson when the officers intend to bring before the councillors what the new digital strategy will entail and will involve?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. The digital strategy is scheduled to come to the Strategic Policy and Resources Committee, depending on dates, which will be approved at the council meeting on the 23rd of June, and whichever council SPNR committee falls around December 2021. So it will be the end of this year. So work has commenced on that new digital strategy, and it will come forward for approval at the end of the year.
Okay, the reason I do ask is, and it's something one's picked up on audit committee with problems with systems like Swift and the various other systems, and we do have a kind of patchwork quilt of systems in the council. Is it going to involve, you know, trying to bring those various systems together so it's much more seamless?
Yeah, Councillor Stewart, there is a review of Swift at the moment, and we do look to rationalise our systems, and I'm sure the digital strategy will set out the direction of travel for that, but that's clearly not part of the corporate workforce plan that's before Council today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Convener. My question about wellbeing was asked by Councillor Wilson. My second question, which I'll ask, is regarding, do we still do the annual survey of staff? You know, the annual questionnaire that goes out to staff about their work, and I can't remember what you call it, employee engagement survey. Is that still conducted? Would that form part of this the report, which is actually a very good report, very readable? Karen, thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor Shires. We've moved away from the once a year employee engagement survey. We now use much more dynamic ways of engaging with our staff, still using survey technology. So over the last year, for example, we have carried out at least 2 council-wide surveys, and we also carry out some mini surveys that can focus in on particular groups of staff. So it's a much more effective and agile means of obtaining staff views to inform any decisions that we take in terms of employment issues. In fact, we are just looking at the results coming in from the most recent survey that was carried out in May, when we were again focusing on health and well-being and staff attitude to working to home and what they thought about future working arrangements. So we're just collating all of that and understanding staff views, because it is very important to engage with staff in that way, as well as taking on board the views expressed by our trade unions, who are also the representative body for our employees.
So although that's not referenced in this report, it informs the content of it.
It does, Councillor Shires. There's many ways of arriving at and informing the decisions that you take about policies, practices, etc. And while we've consulted with service management teams and service managers across the organisation on the content of the plan, the feedback that we receive for employees and a whole range of other matters is taken on board as well. So the answer to that question is yes, it's used to inform the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, thank you, Convener. I think a question in 2 parts. Firstly, in terms of the background papers here, we have the Corporate Workforce Plan 18 to 21 informing this version, the 21 to 23. But I was wondering whether there was a report on the outcomes from the 18 to 21 workforce plan. And related to that, what we've got here is, for example, in the new version of the plan, what we will deliver and what change will be evident. So if I took one, for example, longer term actions, innovative approaches to resourcing new ways of working, what change will be evident, greater flexibility, including who, when and where tasks are carried out. So I was wondering what will support this is more like a strategy than a plan, in terms of there are no specific actions with assigned responsibility or due dates when they will be carried out, or how it will be measured and reported back. So how will officers report back on the performance monitoring of the implementation of this plan, and how will the top level desired outcomes be delivered in terms of actions on the ground? How is that monitored?
Okay, Karen, if you could.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. The HR team are currently working on a final report on the last workforce plan, and the intention would be to take that to scrutiny committee to enable elected members to consider the progress that has been made against what we said that we would do over the period 2018-21. So that will be scheduled for later this year, and we'll agree a date with the convener for that to go into that forum. And going forward, we would wish to do likewise with the new corporate workforce plan. As I said, in relation to the second part of your question, as I said in my introduction, there is a more detailed implementation plan that sits underneath this overarching plan. And within that, we have details of the breakdown of the actions, what the outcomes are, how we will measure success, and more detailed timescales and review dates for that. That is for officers, but to use to implement the plan and to ensure that we are working in a coordinated fashion across all of the teams who are involved in its delivery, and that will be the detail that is used to inform the report that goes to scrutiny for evaluation of performance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Convener. In fact, Councillor Shires asked about the staff engagement survey, and I think the last time we did see that was at the end of 2019. Can I just follow up on that though? Because you're talking, Karen, about a more detailed action plan, but you mentioned in particular 2 council-wide surveys. Can some of the findings of that be fed back to councillors? Because I think it really would be helpful for councillors. I'm not interfering in operational matters. I think it would be helpful to know what the general feelings and morale of our staff are. And I think in particular it'd be helpful to know those who are comfortable working from home, those who'd much prefer to be back in the office, and those that are willing to accept a kind of hybrid solution, maybe 2 days a week from home, 3 from the office. And I think that's helpful to us in terms of planning. You also mentioned with the detailed action plan, is that going to include, you mentioned performance evaluation, will it include key performance indicators and targets that we set for our staff?
Councillor Johnson, in relation to your first question, yes, we will be able to share the results of that, because those were the very questions that we asked about how staff have felt about working from home, and what their views are about returning to the office, whether they would wish to do that on a full-time basis. And I don't wish to share that in advance of it being considered more widely, and the usual checks to be done in terms of numbers, etc. But that information can be shared. In terms of the second part of your question, can you remind me what you were?
It's about performance indicators, KPIs, and so set actual specific targets for what we're looking to do going forward.
The more detailed plan does have some indicators. A lot of it is qualitative information as much as quantitative information. So yes, that's the information that will go forward to scrutiny.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments at this stage? I see no comments, so I shall move the paper. The pandemic has touched all our lives in one way or another, and what is clear is the critical role our workforce across all council services has had in supporting and making a difference to the lives of our citizens by prioritising essential operational services, establishing new and expanded services, and maintaining council business. The pandemic has required us all to work at an unprecedented pace and in different ways, which before COVID we may not have thought possible. We have seen many examples of collaboration and working in partnership. Working together towards a common goal has demonstrated we can achieve great things. Two examples of this are food hubs and the community vaccination centres. Staff have been empowered to take operational decisions. Staff have worked across services and organisations to make best use of their skills and talents. As well as learning new skills, and technology has supported extensive working from home, mobile working and online services. These new ways of working have meant adapting how we manage and support our staff with significant additional support for health and well-being and to build resilience. The Corporate Workforce Plan captures all that has been learnt over the past year, what has worked well, and also the challenges and barriers we have faced. The new plan builds on this learning and sets out achievable actions over the next 2 years, which in turn sets the foundations for the longer term aims and ambitions of the Council over the next 3 to 5 years. What is evident is that this plan connects to and provides the building blocks to deliver many of the Council's priorities, including the Perth and Kinross offer, the Health and Wellbeing Plan, the Medium Term Financial Plan, Organisational Development Plan, our Digital Strategy, our Economic Wellbeing Plan, our Climate Change Strategy and Review of Corporate Assets. The plan is based around 3 key themes. Building in agility is one, which helps to create a more responsive and flexible workforce by continuing to invest in technology to support new ways of working. Building on practices and policies to create a more agile workforce, which meet the needs of our communities and offer our staff a better work-life balance. Second is evolving our talent, focuses on succession planning and how staff are supported to grow and develop. Planning for our future workforce and leaders is critical, and the plan sets out how we will attract and retain young people to the Council. The final theme, refreshing our employment offer, will share the incredible work which goes on every day across the Council to inspire the next generation of public service workers. This will focus on modernising recruitment and selection practices, along with how new employees are welcomed into the organisation through the induction of offer. Improving the employee experience is a key theme which runs throughout this plan. As we recover from the pandemic and look to the future, this plan will ensure we develop skills, knowledge and experience in our workforce in line with how, when and where services will need to be delivered in the future to meet the needs of our various communities. I am reassured that the Corporate Workforce Plan ensures that we are focusing on what matters most and supporting our current staff in terms of their health and well-being and resilience as we continue to recover and build new ways of working. I also welcome the proposals to review the progress of this plan through the Scrutiny Committee on an annual basis. I would like to move the paper and happy to work with all parties in future to help provide our staff with a suitable Corporate Workforce Plan 21-23. Councillor Duff. And I know Councillor's comment, sorry, just to interrupt, I noticed a comment coming from Councillor Shires, if you would care to wait until we've asked, till Councillor Duff is seconded. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. As you've alluded to, the Corporate Workforce Plan is one of several documents which underpin the Perth and Kinross offer and sets the direction for our recovery from this pandemic and how we will make best use of our resources to achieve our goals. We already have a talented, dedicated and resilient workforce, and this plan seeks to adapt and evolve our team build on the lessons learned and make this organisation an even more agile, efficient and effective one. Convener, I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you very much. Councillor Shires, you have a comment.
I'll keep it brief, Convener. It was just to thank Karen Donaldson for a really well written and really easy to follow paper, and just conscious that behind these papers are a whole lot of people. I had the pleasure to meet I'll not name him, but a new member of staff who had at the Blairgowrie Vaccination Centre who had never actually met any of his team. It had all been done remotely. His manager had been hugely supportive and, you know, helped him to integrate into that team without actually having ever met them face to face. It's just a bizarre situation for him to find himself in, but he couldn't have been happier, you know, in the job that he had found with the council, the way he'd been supported, etc. And you think, you know, that's fantastic to hear, and all credit to the managers who've supported particularly new employees through this process, and also just to give a bit of positive feedback to the employee podcast, which is available for employees, which I know has been a huge support to them through the lockdown periods, etc., and just helping them feel integrated into the wider council. And I think it's these kind of innovative new things that have been brought forward over the last year that just really are helping to make this paper a reality for the future.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. Very quickly, you touched on the vaccination policy or the vaccination process. Councillor Shires has just talked about it, and I just wanted to say that I've been volunteering every week at the vaccination centre, and I think it's something every elected member should at least consider doing, and if you're able, I believe you should do. I think you'll find it enjoyable, and it'll help all of us get out of this as quickly as we possibly can. And I'm just going to put the link to where you can register in the chat box now. I'd encourage every elected member to sign up for that. Thank you, Convener.
Right, thank you. Now, just apologies to all. Can we agree the paper? Agreed. Okay, thank you, and thank you for the more general comments as well. I'm sure officers will appreciate the sentiment from many councillors, and I certainly can only say it is with some pride that I have been council leader over the past year, when a significant number of our staff have gone above and beyond what's asked of them, and to some almost to their own personal challenge in doing so. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for their efforts over the past year. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance this morning, for their contributions this morning, and for their patience as we've gone through the meeting. It's been a positive meeting, and I wish you all well for the rest of the day. So thank you very much.